There is a place at the top of the world where the Earth itself refuses to cooperate. Alaska's North Slope stretches across a landscape so vast, so featureless, and so utterly hostile that it makes the surface of the moon look hospitable. No trees, no landmarks, just an impenetrable expanse of frozen tundra that rolls to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the howl of wind that hasn't touched a human structure in hundreds of miles. This is the northernmost reach of the American continent, and for most of the year, it wants nothing to do with civilization. Here's the problem. Beneath this wasteland lies one of the largest oil reserves in North America. And to tap it, you need equipment, not a toolbox, not a pickup truck, but drilling rigs the size of apartment buildings, fuel tanks that weigh more than commercial aircraft, and miles upon miles of massive steel pipe. Millions of tons of industrial machinery must somehow reach the furthest, most unforgiving edges of the continent, and there is no road to get it there. During the brief Alaskan summer, the North Slope transforms into something almost worse than frozen desert. The permafrost thaws just enough at the surface to turn the ground into a vast, squishy marshland, a bottomless sponge of waterlogged moss and muskeg that would swallow an 18-wheeler without a trace. A single truck crossing this terrain would leave scars in the tundra that wouldn't heal for decades. The land is too fragile for permanent gravel roads, too remote for rail, too heavy a payload for air. The geography is not just an obstacle, it is the ultimate enemy. And then winter arrives. When the mercury plunges past 40 below zero, something extraordinary happens. The rules of physics change. That treacherous, truck-eating swamp begins to harden. Water crystallizes, moss becomes cement, the sponge turns to stone, and in that brutal, bone-cracking cold, a window opens, narrow, ephemeral, and unforgiving. This is when the engineers move in. They don't wait for nature to build them a path. They manufacture one. Teams push north into the darkness of the Arctic winter, armed with massive water pumps, specialized equipment, and a singular, almost absurd mission: to construct a highway out of ice. Not a frozen pond crossing, not a short detour over a river, a 300-mile lifeline carved across some of the most desolate terrain on Earth, a road that must bear the weight of civilization's heaviest machinery, and do it all before the clock runs out. Because the clock is always ticking. They have 90 days. 90 days before the temperatures climb, the surface softens, and every inch of their work dissolves back into the swamp. 90 days to move millions of tons of equipment across a highway that exists only in the coldest, darkest window of the Alaskan year. This is the story of a road that doesn't exist on any map. Because by the time the map is printed, the road has already melted away. Here is what most people get wrong about the ice road. They assume nature builds it, that the cold does the work, that you simply wait for the freeze, point your trucks north, and drive. You do not just drive on the snow. The Alaskan tundra is one of the most legally protected landscapes on the planet, and for good reason. Beneath that frozen surface lies a web of ancient root systems, lichens, and mosses so delicate that a single tire rut can trigger erosion that lasts a generation. The state of Alaska enforces a set of regulations known as the Tundra Travel Rules, and they are absolute. Before a single vehicle is permitted to roll onto the North Slope, field crews must drill into the ground and prove, with measurements, not guesses, that the soil is frozen to a minimum depth of 12 inches. They must verify that the snow cover is thick enough to act as a protective blanket over the vegetation below. Until those thresholds are met, the tundra is closed. Millions of dollars in equipment sit idle. The clock ticks, and no one moves. Then, the order comes. Crews push out into the Arctic darkness. And it is true darkness, not twilight, not dim. The sun has abandoned the North Slope entirely, and the only light comes from the headlamps of heavy machinery, grinding forward into a black so complete it feels solid. Temperatures sit at 40 below. Exposed skin freezes in minutes. Metal becomes brittle enough to shatter. This is where the road gets built. It begins with the snowpackers. Massive industrial rollers crawl across the designated route, compressing loose snowfall into a dense uniform foundation. Mile after mile, they flatten the wilderness into something that almost resembles a road surface. Almost. because compressed snow alone cannot support what is coming. Next come the water trucks, a fleet of tanker vehicles, enormous lumbering machines hauling thousands of gallons at a time, lines up along the route. They draw water from pre-approved lakes, sources carefully selected to minimize ecological disruption, and then they spray. High-pressure nozzles launch arcs of water into the Arctic air, and at 40 below, something almost beautiful happens. The water crystallizes mid-flight. It never hits the ground as liquid. It lands as ice, layering onto the compressed snow in a fine, frozen mist. And they do not stop, day and night. Though those words lose all meaning in the perpetual darkness, the tankers run their loops. Spray, freeze, layer. Spray, freeze, layer. Each pass adds another fraction of an inch to the surface. The crews work in shifts that blur together, headlights cutting through walls of ice fog created by their own sprayers, building the road one frozen coat at a time. They repeat this process until the surface is nearly a foot thick, a solid load-bearing pavement of pure ice stretching 300 miles across the top of the world, a skating rink engineered to carry 100-ton loads, a highway built from water and darkness and relentless, unforgiving cold. The road is built, 300 miles of manufactured ice stretching north into the void. And now, the convoys roll. Picture this, a 100-ton drilling rig lashed to a trailer the length of a basketball court, crawling across a frozen highway in total darkness. The driver sits behind the wheel of a machine that could crush a house, and beneath his tires, there's nothing but ice. Below that ice, water. Below the water, a tundra so fragile it is protected by federal law. He is driving a building across a frozen lake that stretches to the horizon, and the single greatest threat to his life is not the cold, not the darkness, not a mechanical failure. It is a wave he cannot see. When a heavy vehicle moves across a frozen surface, the ice does not simply hold firm. It bends. The sheer mass of the load creates a depression, a bowl in the ice sheet that moves with the truck like a shadow, and that depression displaces the water beneath. It has to go somewhere, so it travels outward in a pressure wave, rolling under the ice just ahead of the vehicle, a silent, invisible force with the power to end everything in an instant. This is where the physics become a monster. If a driver accelerates, if he pushes past the critical speed threshold, he begins to overtake his own wave. The displaced water, now trapped between the advancing truck and the wall of pressure it created, has nowhere to escape. It pushes upward. The hydraulic force builds with every second, generating torsion across the ice sheet that it was never designed to absorb. And then, without warning, the surface detonates. The ice doesn't crack gently. It shatters like plate glass hit with a sledgehammer, and 100 tons of steel plunges into the Arctic water below. There is no rescue from that, so the drivers obey a speed limit that feels like psychological torture, 15 to 25 miles per hour. That is it. For hours, sometimes for an entire day. A 300-mile crawl through featureless darkness with no radio signal, no passing lane, and no room for a single lapse in concentration. Because the danger is not only in going too fast, linger too long in one spot, apply too much stationary pressure, and the friction of the tires generates just enough heat to weaken the surface beneath you. The ice begins to soften. The road starts to consume itself. Too fast, you die. Too slow, you die. The margin is measured in single miles per hour, and through all of it, the ice speaks. It groans. It shudders. It emits a deep, harmonic moan that rises from somewhere far below the surface. An alien sound, like the hull of a submarine under pressure. Experienced drivers learn to read it, to feel the pitch and frequency in their chest and know whether the road beneath them is holding steady or beginning to fail. The singing of the ice is the only instrument panel that matters out here. When the pitch changes, when the harmonic shifts from a low groan to a sharp, cracking shriek, the driver knows the road is telling him something very simple. You are not welcome here. It begins with light. After months of absolute darkness, a pale glow appears on the southern horizon. Not a sunrise. Not yet. Just a whisper of amber bleeding across the edge of the sky, as if the sun is deciding whether to return. For a few days, it is almost beautiful. The tundra catches the light for the first time in months, and the ice road glitters like a ribbon of glass laid across the top of the world. But the drivers do not admire it. They dread it, because that light carries warmth. And warmth, even the faintest suggestion of it, is a death sentence for the road. It does not take much. A rise of just a few degrees shifts everything. The surface that once rang like steel under the tires begins to soften. The crystal structure of the ice, those carefully manufactured layers built coat by coat through weeks of relentless spraying, starts to honeycomb. Air pockets form. The bonds between molecules weaken. What was once a highway capable of bearing a 100-ton load becomes something closer to wet sugar, crumbling from the inside out. And there is no way to repair it. No patch. No fix. The road is dying, and the only option is to outrun its death. The frantic retreat begins. Every remaining convoy on the north slope turns south. Radios crackle with urgency as dispatchers calculate which loads can still make it and which must be abandoned. The math is brutal and unforgiving. If a drilling rig misses the window, even by a day, it does not wait on the shoulder for a tow truck. There is no shoulder. There is no tow truck. That rig sinks into the softening ground and sits there, marooned in an ocean of mud and muskeg, unreachable until the following winter. Millions of dollars stranded at the edge of the continent because spring arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule. And then, silence. Within weeks, the 300-mile highway simply ceases to exist. The foot-thick ice pavement, the same surface that carried the weight of entire industrial operations, melts back into the soil as if it were never there. The water seeps into the permafrost. The compressed snow dissolves into the marshland. The bottomless sponge returns, swallowing every trace of the road that once crossed it. And here is the part that borders on the miraculous. The moss grows back, the lichens bloom. The delicate tundra vegetation that the engineers fought so hard to protect pushes through the wet ground and reclaims every inch of the route. Within a single growing season, there is no evidence, not a rut, not a scar, not a single mark, that millions of tons of steel and machinery ever passed this way. It is the ultimate ghost project, a 300-mile feat of engineering that builds itself, serves its purpose, and then erases itself from the face of the earth. Humans do not conquer the Arctic. We never have. We negotiate with it. We wait for the narrow ephemeral window when the cold is brutal enough to turn the impossible into the barely possible, and then we move, fast, disciplined, and humble, before the land takes its road back. 90 days. That is the deal. And the Arctic has never once extended the deadline. If this story reminded you that the most extraordinary engineering on Earth isn't permanent, it's temporary, then subscribe and join us for the next journey into the world's most impossible projects. Because somewhere right now, someone is building something you won't believe.